Just before I put this cover back on the engine, I had put this points cover back on without lubricating the wick. So I'll just slide this back off here. And I'm just going to take some light oil. This is actually some two-stroke mixing oil. And I'm just going to put a couple of drops on the wick here, the felt wick. That will lubricate the cam if it's at the right angle. So just dip my screwdriver in there. A couple of drops on there, and then I'll just put a drop on each one of these pivots for the cam. Sorry, for the ignition points. Take most of it back off again. Push it in a bit with my finger since it's a bit cool here today. Anyway, okay, so we've got some oil on our wick and a couple of drops, at least one on each of the pivot pins for the ignition points. Okay, I'll just put this cover back on, and I'm not worrying about the gasket. They are available. I do actually have a few, but I'm not going to bother putting one on this one. So now that cover is ready to go back onto the engine. So before we go putting the cover on, there's a few things we have to finish up. One thing I'd like to do is I'd like to check the torque of the nut holding the Saber rotor on. So according to the Villiers maintenance manual, the Saber rotor is to be torqued to 650 inch-pounds. Now, I don't have a torque wrench that reads 650 inch-pounds, so I divided 650 by 12, and that gave me 54 point something. So I'm going to torque that nut to 55 foot-pounds. So here we have the engine with the strap wrench on the rotor and a torque wrench with a socket already on the nut, and the torque wrench is set to 55 foot-pounds. The click of the wrench tells me that is torqued to 55 foot-pounds. Sorry. Inch-pounds and foot-pounds crossed up, but that nut is torqued to 55 foot-pounds. So the cam has been polished up here. Sorry, set the mirror down. So the cam here, I've polished it up. This portion of it here is the part that contacts the rubbing block on the points. I polished this part of it here while it was there. And I'll show you something with the mirror here. So after I polished the cam up, I set it in place, lining up the red mark. So the punch mark in the rotor lines up with the notch in the cam. Then I put the two screws and lock washers in using my 1/4 inch ratchet and a straight screwdriver bit. And now that the cam is on, I went ahead and with the neutral indicator wire, this yellow wire here, I'll show you with the mirror here where it went. So on the side of the transmission, by that pinion, the neutral indicator pinion, there's a brass contact that comes out to the neutral indicator pinion, and there's a spot to plug that yellow wire in to that contact, so that when that contact touches the pin on the neutral indicator pinion, that grounds this wire and turns the neutral indicator light on the dash. So the cam is tight. The neutral indicator wire is plugged in. So now I'm going to make sure, yeah, the nut and washer are not on that stud. So I'm going to set this cover in place here. And I'm going to pull the slack back through this cover, this wire there, and I have to line up this screw, sorry, the stud. It has to go in the hole at the front here, which is a little bit of a challenge to see. So want the stud started in, want the stud started in that hole. And then wiggle it because the cam is going through the points, and the two, sorry, I'm jiggling the camera around, the two pins, the dowels, go into the cover here to hold it in place, and that goes on. So now we have a pair of screws here somewhere. I have 2 screws here. One is longer than the other. The longer one to the left goes in the bottom, so I'll take the shorter one. Put it on the top here by hand. Bottom one way down here, where we can't really see it. We can feel where it goes. So using the 9mm wrench, I tighten the nut on the stud on the front of the cover, and using the 1/4" ratchet with the 5/16 socket and screwdriver bit out of my impact set, I tightened up the top screw, seen here, and the bottom screw, which is way down in here. I tighten them up, and I might be able to show you the stud. No, can't show you the stud, it's in the darkness there, but it's at the front of the cover. And I put the cover on so I know where that nut is. So now we have some wires to plug in here. We have a red wire. It goes to a red wire that can go into the red wire with black tracer. Of course, it's going to be hard to do with one hand here. And then we should have a black wire. There's lots of black wires here. There we go. There's a black wire. It goes to the black wire with the red tracer. So those are set together. I'll push them together better. And then we can thread this neutral indicator wire back up and connect it to the terminal beside the seat here. I'll see if I can get it threaded through there. Okay, there's the wire. So I can plug it back into the terminal block here so it connects to the wow, we're all zoomed in here, to the white wire. So there's an empty spot there. We'll plug that yellow wire in with that white wire, and assembly will be finished that way. With the side cover on, the 2 screws are tight. The nut and washer are on the front of the cover, and the nut is tight. I did put the points cover on and snug the screws down. We cleaned the points. So I made sure the wires for the points were plugged in firmly. I ran the wire for the neutral indicator light and plugged it in firmly in the connector at the edge of the seat here. It's partially hidden. And then I took the brittle old fuel lines that were on here off. I ran a rubber fuel line from the carburetor, the diameter fitting on the carburetor, to a fuel filter. I like to use nice large clear fuel filter so I can see when there's fuel in it and when there's stuff other than fuel in it. And I like to put a fuel shut-off between the tank here and the filter so that I can shut the fuel off to change the filter. Now, what I've used here is a generic shut-off kit, and fuel line and shut-off kit, and a generic filter. These are the packages that came in. I just get them from the local hardware store / auto parts store. And I use spring clamps the constant tension spring clamps on here instead of gear clamps. You can use whatever you're comfortable with. What I will do before I attempt to start this engine is I will put some fuel in the tank with this shut-off turned off and watch for leaks. Then I'll turn the fuel shut-off on. I'll pull probably pull the air filter off here and just watch for leaks either out through the carburetor throat or by the tickler button here. And if I don't see any leaks, I'll turn the fuel back off for a moment, connect the battery, and turn the key. Now, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, because before I need to worry about putting fuel in here and trying to start this, I have no exhaust system yet. So I'm going to wrestle the muffler and exhaust pipe back into place. I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I'm not going to bother showing that in the camera. It's just a matter of wrestling the pipe and muffler back into place and getting that finned nut right there to start on the fitting on the cylinder. Now there should be a gasket between this flange on the pipe and the cylinder. If I have one handy, I'll put it in. It doesn't look like there was one in it when I took it apart, so I don't worry about that. But if I can find one, I'll slip it in and put that on. Again, I'll do that all without showing it on the camera. It's just there's no secret to it. It just might take me a few minutes to find the right position to wrestle the pipe and muffler in. I do not like to take the muffler and pipe apart if I can help it. Just putting it back together so it doesn't leak worse than it did when it came apart is a bit of a chore while it's in place. So anyway, I'm going to install the exhaust system, check the fuel system for leaks, and come back and we'll see what happens when we try to start this engine. Well, that went a little better than I thought it might. I wiggled and twisted and turned and got the exhaust system into place, and I did find an exhaust gasket, the same as this one, in another gasket set I had purchased. This is a 4-speed gasket set, available new. So I put one of those exhaust gaskets in between the pipe and the cylinder, used my Villiers pin spanner and tightened the nut down as firmly as I could. And I also installed the exhaust outlet. Now this one just uses a 1/4-inch bolt with a couple of jam nuts on the outside. This is a later style tip. The earlier style just uses 2 screws and it may have a set screw to hold the tailpipe. But anyway, that's how this one goes. So it's on. It's snug at the moment. After I run it a bit, I'll recheck the nut with this pin spanner and make sure everything's still tight. But we're getting closer to see if it'll run.